This is Pod Populi.
Podcast for the people.
Welcome back to The Wedding Buzz. It's your host, Sydney, and today I'm going to let you in on a little secret. The secret to a flawless wedding day. Your wedding day is something that most people have thought about since you were a little kid, and I get it. Not everyone has romanticized the process of wedding planning or thought about it, or maybe you don't want a huge elaborate event, but I can almost guarantee that it is the same for everyone. Everyone has at least put a little thought into it. And the one common ground that everyone has is that you want it to be a smooth day. That's like the one common goal that everybody has when they think about their wedding, whether it's like you want to have a little elopement or you want to have a big grand party. The one goal that everybody has in common is that you want it to have a smooth day. And the secret to having this smooth day, I'm telling you, is having a good team behind you. Having a good team of vendors behind you is going to make sure that your day is smooth. And here today, we're going to talk about how do you know you're picking a good team? What are some key things to think about when you're picking your vendor team? And what are some red flags to look at? How do you know to stay away from certain vendors? So let's dive in, because the one thing I also want to mention is you might not have the means to hire the most expensive vendors, but that doesn't mean you're going to have a bad team. There are some people who are newer in the business, who this is their baby. They're willing to work day in and day out to make sure that their clients are happy. And so they might not be super expensive, but they might put in their best effort and really go above and beyond for you. And then on the other side of things, there are some vendors who have been in the business for like 20, 30 years. And because they have their name and their reputation, they keep getting booked and their prices are high. But maybe you're just a number to them. Maybe you're one of a gazillion brides and they're not going to pay attention to the little details the way that a smaller vendor would. So it's not just the most expensive vendor is going to be the best one and the least expensive is going to be bad. There are some things that you really want to look at while you're picking your vendors. So how do you choose your vendor team? I know nobody likes to talk about this, but the first thing that you need to determine is your budget and roughly break down each category to figure out how much you have to spend in each vendor category. Every wedding has a budget, whether it's $10,000 or $200,000. Every wedding has some sort of parameters. And of course, some are tighter than others, but really sit down and think about how much can you spend on this wedding without becoming sick over it. You guys, you don't want to spend so much on this wedding that you're starting off your marriage in so much debt and it's just a problem for you. And I know I was just saying that, it doesn't matter the budget necessarily for your vendors, like the bigger, most expensive vendors doesn't mean it's the best thing. But either way, you need to figure out a budget and need to figure out how much you can spend in each category from the beginning. Because if not, you'll end up booking a DJ for $6,000, not realizing that you have no money left over for the flowers. You have to look at the big picture before you start picking your vendors. So how do we know if they're a good vendor? Once you have your budget kind of set, okay, here's our overall budget, and here's the breakdown of what I would like to spend in each category. You have to go through and get quotes from your vendors and see who's even in your ballpark. And then how do you know if they're a good vendor? If you've ever taken a sales class, you might have heard before, you've probably heard before, you need to know, like, and trust in order to get sales. Your customers need to know you, like you, and trust you. And so now you are the customer in this situation, and it's the flip side. You have to feel like you know them. Who is this person that you're going to invite to the most important day? Who are they? Do you know them? Do you like them? Once you get to know them, do you like them? And do you trust them? Do they have content out there of recent work that allows you to get to know them? Do they have photos of their work? Do they have videos? We live in a social media world. It's 2024. Are they keeping up and posting videos of their work and showing you their work? And I feel bad for those vendors who just don't like social media, because I totally get it. But how are you as the client supposed to know if they're going to do a good job or not? How are you supposed to know who they are if they're not posting current pictures, or even if they're not posting it on social media, if you reach out to them, can you ask them for a portfolio? Can you ask them where they've recently worked or what projects they're working on right now? So get to know them. Once you get to know them, figure out, do you like this person? Is this someone that you want on your wedding day and you want to deal with the entire process of planning your wedding? And then most importantly, do you trust them? Are their answers consistent every time you ask them something? Can they answer the question easily? Does it seem like they're genuinely talking to you? Or does it seem like they're struggling to come up with an answer that they think you're going to want to hear? That can be, a red flag. You can't necessarily trust them if, the conversation's not flowing and you don't feel like you know them, you like them, and you trust them. So you might be thinking, I like them, they seem nice, but how do I know that they're going to do a good job? Well, honestly, that can be tricky. Every time I work with a vendor that I haven't worked with before, my guard's a little bit higher. I am more aware of what is happening, keeping an eye on them, making sure that they're doing their job correctly. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing. You don't know 100% until you know. And again, not to toot my own horn, but another benefit of having a wedding planner is that you have someone in your corner who wants every aspect of your wedding day to be flawless. I have no problem being the bad guy and making sure that what you envision is coming to life and what you're paying for is coming to life. But just because I said you don't know until you know, there are ways to vet them out and kind of figure out, are they going to do a good job or not? At the end of the day, you do have to just kind of trust and see. And this isn't to say I don't like new vendors. I love meeting new vendors and getting to know them and adding more to my roster, I guess you could say, of people who I like to work with. But you have to look out for new things if you don't know them, or me as a planner, if I haven't worked with them before. So one way to know if you're going to get a good vendor, again, is hire a wedding planner, because of course, it's your first time probably planning a wedding. You haven't worked with these people before, but planners work with vendors again and again and again. So if you hire a planner, that is one benefit. I know I'm tooting my own horn right now, but it's real. I can tell you, hey, that photographer, I would never work with them again. Their social media looks great, but I wouldn't work with them again because they totally ignored the timeline and caused dinner to be 45 minutes early. Yes. Or I'm sorry, 45 minutes late. Yes, that happened. We were at a golf course, country club, and the photographer took my bride and groom on a golf cart, which was in the plan, but they had about 25, 30 minutes to do this. And they took my bride and groom away for an hour. And I didn't know where they were. I was outside running around the building trying to find my bride and groom because the reception needed to start. The guests were, getting a little hangry, and the photographer took them away. And I get it. Their pictures are gorgeous, but there was no communication. I was calling her. I was trying to call her assistant. Nobody was answering. It was a golf course. I was like, what? I didn't know. I couldn't go run out there and find them, which was pretty frustrating, to be honest. And it caused dinner to be late, which then caused dancing to not start on time. And then they didn't have enough, as much time at the end for dancing. And again, the day worked out fine. It was smooth, but it's just unfortunate when vendors do things like that, because it does cause the day to go a little wonky. The caterers are like, can we serve dinner? I'm like, no, the bride and groom aren't even here. So like I said, a planner can tell you these stories of yeah, their pictures turned out great, but they totally ignored the timeline and did not care when they came back. And I was like, hey, we're running late. She was like, oh, it's fine. I'm like, for you, it's not fine for me. It's not fine for everybody else. Same with the hair and makeup team. Do they follow the timeline? Do they do a good job? Have previous brides been happy with them? So if you hire a professional person to help you plan your wedding, you at least can take their word for it and their experiences and know if these people are doing a good job. If you don't have a planner, ask your venue. Who has worked there before and who are their favorite people and why? Look through the venue social media pages and look through the photos that the venue has been tagged in. On Instagram, you can go to the venue and see the photos that the venue is posting. But if you go over, you can also click on tagged photos and you can see what previous brides have been posting pictures and tagging their vendors It'll show you a lot more into, because sometimes I feel like other vendors post more often than the venues. And so you can go to their tagged photos and find vendors that way of people who have worked at the venue. And then you can ask your venue, hey, who's worked here before? Who do you like? Who do you don't like? Or, hey, I saw that this DJ played here. How'd it go? Maybe you can even find, I'm not telling you to stalk people on Instagram, but maybe you can find like a past bride and message her on Instagram and just say, hey, like I'm getting married here. I saw that you had this DJ. Curious if you had a good experience or like what you thought of them. And so if you don't have a planner, ask your venue. Does your planner or your venue trust them? Because they probably know them. So do they like them? And then do they trust them? Let's quickly go vendor by vendor and highlight a few things to make sure that there's some specific questions you can ask each vendor. We do have to take a quick break, but when we get back, we're going to go through vendor by vendor, and I'm going to highlight a few questions that you can ask to make sure that you're, vetting out your vendors. Okay, welcome back. We are going to go through a few wedding vendors and a few questions that you can ask your vendors while you are booking them to make sure that you are really picking the right vendors and asking them the right questions and kind of making sure that you can know, like, and trust them. So let's talk about photographers. Everyone loves wedding photos. So first of all, do you like what you see? Do they have a lot of work to show? And would you be happy if this is what your wedding album looked like? I feel like a common mistake that some people make is they pick a photographer that has all light, airy, white, washed out photos. And then when they get their photos back, they're mad that their photos are light, airy, white, washed out photos. And I'm like, okay, well, you need to pick a photographer who has an editing style that you like. So the first big question is, do you even like what you see on the website? Same with, some photographers edit their photos very like dark and moody, which is beautiful, but do you like that? So it sounds silly. It sounds like duh, but it's a very common thing of people just think, oh, like that photo is dark, but I want it lighter or whatever. I don't know what people are thinking, but make sure that you like the editing style of the photographers. Another good question to ask the photographer is, how many hours are they going to be there on wedding day? Please don't do anything less than a 7-hour package. I like 8 hours at minimum, but I'll slide and say 7 hours. Of course, this is for like a traditional wedding. If you're doing like a really small elopement or something completely not traditional for your wedding, then the 7-hour, 8-hour package doesn't really matter. You have to figure out your own timeline. But if we're talking about a traditional wedding day, at least a 7-hour package. And I say at least 7, I really mean 8. I really like 8 hours at least. I honestly like 10 hours, just my opinion. I love having 10 hours, and there's nothing to worry about. And I know when you're looking at like adding hours to your photography package, you might be thinking another, like, I don't know what they charge. Every photographer is different, but $100, $200, $300. I know it seems like a lot of money, which it is, but when it comes to like making sure your wedding day is really smooth, that's not that much money. And I see brides all the time being like, I don't want to pay for the photographer to be there an extra hour, but they'll go spend another couple $1,000s on some decor piece that they totally didn't need, So don't forget about logistics and function of your day. That helps the day run so much smoother, which is why like picking your vendors is so important, because the right vendors are going to prioritize logistics and function as well. So ask them about the photo package. Make sure it's at least a 7 or 8 hour package. I like 10 hours if you can swing that. 10 hours is a little overboard, so 7, 8 hours at least. Another question to ask for photographers, do they have a second shooter? I recommend this because they can divide and conquer the day, which makes the timeline more efficient. Ask the photographer, how long will it take to get your photos back? I'd say normally about 90 days. But see if it's in the contract and see what they say, because if it's not in the contract, you might not get your photos for 2 years, and there's not much you can do about it if there was no deadline in the contract. I could go on and on, but we're going to move on to DJs. Those are just a few questions to ask your photographer. Start with those questions and see How can they answer it? Do they have good answers to your questions? Are they able to answer it? Do their answers seem like trustworthy? And ask them how they normally handle these things. Okay, DJs. You need to talk to them and you need to like their personality. They are the ones with the microphone. They are the ones running the show. So how do you like how they sound? Do they make stupid jokes that you're going to be embarrassed by? Or do they sound professional and fun at the same time? The DJ has to be, fun, get the party started, but you don't want them to get too silly and obnoxious where you're embarrassed. So number one with a DJ is, do you like them? Get to know them, and do you like them, and do you trust them to not make a fool of themselves in front of your entire wedding? Ask them if they have a microphone for ceremony. Do they include that in the package? Do they have a microphone and speakers for ceremony? Do they have another set of speakers and whatnot for the cocktail hour? Because remember, your guests are going to go straight from the ceremony over to cocktail hour. You don't want 10 minutes of the DJ setting up and moving gear and messing around when the guests are getting to cocktail hour. That's not, a nice, smooth, beautiful transition. So do they have a setup for the ceremony and then a setup for the cocktail hour and then another setup for the reception? How do they make sure that that's a seamless process? Make sure that you're telling them what your preferences are. They should be asking you a lot of questions to get to know your music style and your tastes, but make sure you are telling them. I mean, if they're not asking you what your preferences are as far as music, then that's probably a red flag. But make sure that you are telling them what you like, what you don't like, and don't be shy. I know a lot of people, even myself, I look back to my own wedding and I remember the conversation I had with the DJ, and I remember just being so like, I trust you, I totally trust you, which, you want to let a DJ do their thing. They do this again and again, and a good DJ will know how to read the room. Last week, if you listen to that episode with DJ Ivanko, he talked about that, of like reading the room, and sometimes people make requests that he's like, this is going to ruin the whole party. So you want to trust your DJ and let them do their thing, but they have to cater to your preferences. If you're totally into country, which country isn't always easy to dance to, but maybe they could do like a little remix of country. If you're totally into that and then they start playing like rap, you're not going to be happy, or vice versa. If you're into hip hop and rap and then they're playing just 80s music all night long, you're not going to be happy. So make sure that you express what your preferences are and be, not bossy with it, but speak up. Definitely speak up, because that's one thing I feel like I even made this mistake of just being like, yeah, like this is what I like, but I trust you. And my DJ wasn't bad, but they were definitely playing stuff that I was like, I don't like this. Like this isn't a great song. This isn't what I want to dance to. So make sure that you are expressing your preferences to them, and make sure that they are asking you, and they need to be really interested in what you like. Ask them how they make sure that the right song is playing when you walk down the aisle, and ask them what they do if the timeline is taking a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. Like, how do they navigate through the day? How do they make sure that the song that you want played when your bridesmaids and groomsmen are walking down the aisle is the right song? And what if they take longer than they thought? Can the DJ loop the song? Can they make that seamless? What if it's shorter? Can they kind of cut that song and get it to the next song so that when you're ready to walk down the aisle, they're ready to play the song that you need to walk down the aisle? Ask them how they do this. Ask them where they stand at the ceremony. How do they communicate with your planner or the venue staff, or how do they communicate to make sure that they're ready to go when you're ready to go? Sounds silly, but it's a good question to ask. See what's included in their package. Many offer lighting packages and photo booths. Ask the differences in their packages. Ask them what they do if the crowd is dying down. How do they keep the party going? Ask them their opinion on controlling a crowd and keeping the energy up. Do they have good answers for these things? And are they happy to be talking with you? Do they seem annoyed that you're asking questions? Now, I'm not telling you to like hound them with questions and be nasty or anything like that. Just a nice casual conversation. Are they happy to be talking with you? Are they happy to ease your worries and give you the answers because they should be. If they seem annoyed that you're asking any questions, again, I'm not telling you to hound them with questions, but if they aren't willing to hop on the phone with you and have like a 30-minute conversation prior to booking, that could be seen as a red flag. Florists. Let's hop on to florists. Again, I could go on and on with each category, but let's go to florists. Florists really need to understand your vision. Are they taking the time to meet you and look through your ideas, look through your Pinterest board? Because if you say a rose, let me tell you, there are multiple different types of roses. If you say a pink rose, there are multiple different types or shades of pink roses. And florists need to be very detailed. And I've found the best way is pictures. You have to show them pictures and you need to talk about the details of the pictures. Are they explaining not just like what colors are going to be in the arrangements, but are they talking about the types of flowers? Are they taking the time to go through types of flowers and different shades of flowers? And are they taking the time to understand your vision? I promise you, if you say a pink rose, there's so many different versions of that. And if you don't take the time to go in and tell them what shade you want or what type of flower you want, it's not going to be what you're envisioning. Think about for flowers, if you just say pink, well, is that pink roses? Is that hydrangeas? Are they showing you examples? And then another question to ask for the florist is, can they reuse your flowers? Ask them about their process. How do they set up on the wedding day? How do they break down? Can they set up for ceremony and then move your flowers for your reception so that you're getting more bang for your buck? Sometimes this is hard to do. If they tell you no in certain areas, don't necessarily get mad at them, because it depends if they make the arrangement and then bring it to the wedding, or if they have to make the arrangement on a certain structure. Like if there's an arch at the wedding venue, are they making the arrangement around that arch? They're not going to be able to like deconstruct that and then reconstruct it for the ceremony just during cocktail hour. But see if they're willing to work with you. The answer might not always be yes, but at least see if they're willing to work with you. Make sure that they are coming to set everything up. What kind of team do they have? What time do they arrive on wedding day? And then make sure that they're coming back to break it down. Do they take it down? What is the process? And again, make sure that they really care about your vision and that they're not talking over you. Make sure that they're asking you questions, allowing you to speak, that they're showing pictures, that you guys it's a collaborative process. That's the only way to make sure that they're going to do what you're envisioning, is that you have a good meeting, multiple meetings even, you go through pictures, and just make sure that they're taking the time and that they really care. That's the biggest thing with florists, is do they really care? And can they tell you exactly what they're going to order, what type of flowers they're going to order, and why? You might say, I want this, and they're like, hey, I suggest this. Why? A good florist will go through the lengths to do that. All right, we're going to take a quick break again, but when we come back, we're going to talk about venues. How do you know you're getting a good venue, and what are some questions to ask for venues? Okay, welcome back. Now it's time to talk about venue. How do you know you're getting a good venue? What are some questions to ask? Again, the key with all of this is asking questions and seeing how they answer. Are they willing to answer? Are they willing to take the time? That's how you get to know them and how you trust them, is just, are they a good person and are they willing to put in the work? That's why I said at the beginning, just because a vendor is super expensive doesn't mean they're going to do the best job. And just because a vendor is a little bit less expensive doesn't mean they're going to do a bad job. You don't know how long these people have been in their careers. Or you might be able to see, oh, this one's been in business for 20 years and this other one's been in business only 2 years. Doesn't necessarily mean the new one's going to do a bad job. You got to get to know the vendors, make sure you like them, and make sure that you trust them. Okay, so venue. How long do you have the space for? Do you have the space all day? Are you only allowed in there a couple hours? When can your vendors set up? And when must everything be cleaned up at the end of the night? This is a big thing. You might think, oh, I'll just extend it. Well, some venues have a hard stop. Depending on the neighborhoods that the venues are in, sometimes they have a noise ordinance where they have to quit the music at 9 o'clock. Are you okay with that? Or 10 o'clock? Are you okay with that? Some of them don't have like a noise issue, but like the package is 4 hours. Can you extend that if you want? How much money is it going to cost you? And when do you have to make that decision? Do they have a space for you to get ready? Is there a getting ready space, like a bridal suite, a groomsman suite? And you got to think about how many bridesmaids and groomsmen you have, because if it's a tiny little room for you to get ready in, that's not going to be very convenient if you have 8 bridesmaids. So look at the getting ready space. Ask what time you're allowed in there as well, because a lot of these places will only let you in the bridal suite at 2 p.m. And if your ceremony is around 4, that's not enough time for everybody to get ready. It's not necessarily a bad thing. That's a really common thing that I see. I see the girls doing hair and makeup at a hotel and then going to the bridal suite a little bit later in the afternoon and just maybe getting dressed in the bridal suite rather than getting completely ready. But at least ask these questions in the beginning so that you know what to expect before you're signing a contract. Do they have a required vendors list, or is it just a preferred vendors list? Again, a required vendors list isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's not a good or bad thing. It's just something that you need to ask so that you are prepared, because you might have a DJ that you saw at another wedding and you love this DJ, you want this DJ, but then you book this venue and they have a required vendors list and you figure out you can't use your other DJ, or they might charge you a fee, or there's an approval process. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. And maybe there's a required vendors list, but yeah, you just have to, submit this other DJ for approval and make sure that everything's good to go. So there might be a required vendors list, but you can still get an outside DJ. You just have to jump through a little hoops or something. A required vendors list isn't necessarily a bad thing, because if a vendor has made the required vendors list, that means that venue trusts that vendor. They know them, they like them, they trust them. That vendor works at your venue over and over and over again. That vendor knows the space, they know how it works, they know the ins and outs, and that's a good thing. I will say, like, a month ago, I was at a venue that I had never been to before, and I had an issue where I was trying to get the bride outside to take pictures kind of in the back of the venue because the guests were already arriving in the front. And I, was like, shoot, how do I sneak her by? And so I was trying to go through these hoops and like kind of block her as we quickly walked by. And then the venue came to me, or one of the people at the venue was like, oh, we have a back door. There's a back door that she could have walked out of. Well, I didn't know. And so again, it wasn't like that big of a deal, but it was my first time at that venue. And so it was a learning curve. The good thing is now I know. Now I worked at that venue. And so next time I will know. So it's, again, not a bad thing if your vendor has never worked at a venue. I work at new venues all the time and I just have to figure it out. I always go do a walkthrough prior. But I will say it does help. I definitely feel a little bit more comfy going into a wedding day if it's at a venue that I've worked at before, because I just know the flow. I know the ins and outs. I know, half the time I get to know the staff. I get to know the servers. I get to know the manager. We're friends at this point because I've worked there before. And that goes for all of your vendors. So if they've worked at if they have a required vendor list, that means they know, like, and trust those vendors. And that's a great way to know that you're going to get a good vendor. But going back to the main point here, ask if they have this list, if they have a required list, just so that you know if you're going to be locked into that set of vendors or if you can choose anyone in the world. See what's required. Do they have tables and chairs, and what do they look like? What are the options? Do you like what they look like? If the answer is no, if you don't like what they look like, it's not necessarily a bad thing. You can just rent any chair. But you need to know before you book, because if you're renting chairs outside, that's obviously going to cost more money. So see if tables, chairs, linens, chargers, plates, flatware, glasses, all of that. Is it included? Is it not? What does it look like? And if you don't like it, make sure you're looking into rental companies and their prices, and that you can afford both this venue and outside rental items before you're signing contracts. With the venue, make sure you ask the capacity. What is the most guests that they can fit, and how crowded will the room be? If you have a big guest count, if you have a large guest count, Make sure there's space for your guest count. And a lot of venues, not a lot, but some venues will say, oh yeah, we can fit 200 people in here. And I'm looking at the space saying, how? Now, yes, we could pack them in like a can of sardines, but that's not comfortable. Your guests don't want to be on top of each other when they're backing out of their chair and the chairs are hitting. Nobody likes that. That is not a nice luxury event. So make sure that, see how many guests the venue says they can accommodate. And in my opinion, I would go a little less. I feel that some venues, if they say 200, I would say like 180 is what I would do. Would 200 fit? Yes. Usually that's pretty tight. That is pretty tight. Another question to ask your venue is catering in-house or is it out of house? Do they have inside catering, and is it mandatory that you use the indoor inside catering team? Or can you find any caterer you want? Or sometimes it's like a shell venue where they don't have a kitchen or catering, but they have a catering company that you're required to use. So make sure that you're asking these questions. Do they do plated? Do they do buffet? How do they set up the room? These are all questions that you need to ask. The other thing with catering specifically, and I put this kind of with the venue because sometimes it's tied in to the venue, sometimes it's not, but look at the catering prices. And when you're seeing $60 a person, $100 a person, make sure you're reading the fine print, because does that include the cocktail hour past hors d'oeuvres? What is the price for that? How much food is included for that? And then does it include, or what fees are mandatory? A lot of the time catering, you're going to see tax. I know here in Florida, it's about a 7% tax. But make sure that you're looking and seeing what tax is going to be included. And then service fees. I want to say typically a 22% service fee. Sometimes it's 18, sometimes it's 25. I have seen 35%, which I think is kind of insanity. But make sure that you are looking at their service fees. And again, it's not that the service fee is necessarily a bad thing. They have to pay for the food. They have to pay for their cooks. They have to pay for their servers. They have to pay for the bartenders. It's a lot of work, and especially if they don't have a kitchen on site, they have to cook the food somewhere and bring the food and make sure that it's warm and served at the exact right time. It's a lot of work. So I understand service fees. I think 35% is a little much, but just make sure you look and see what the service fee is and then calculate it. You have to do some math. What is 22% of the full price? If it's, $100 per person and you have 100 guests, and then there's 22% of a service fee and 7% tax, what is your final bill going to be? It's probably going to be a lot more than you think off the bat. And then the other thing is gratuity. Is it mandatory? Is it included? I've seen like 15, 18, 20, 22% gratuity included on top. I know recently I was looking at a catering contract and it was like something like a 35% service fee and then like gratuity on top. I think altogether it ended up being like a 56% fee. So it was the price plus 56% of fees. That's more than half. That's a lot, which, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like the couple ended up going with this company because like their price per person was pretty cheap. And then the fees brought the price kind of back up to average, where on the flip side, some places might charge more up front of like their price per person is just going to be higher and then their fees are lower. So all I'm saying is it's not good or bad. It's just do math. You have to do math. And going back to one of my first points when I was talking about the budget, you need to do this math before you start signing contracts so that you don't run into issues that you're not expecting. With the venue / caterer, make sure that you're asking how many servers, how many bartenders will there be? And again, about dishes and flatware, like does the venue include it? Does the caterer include it? Does the caterer team have servers and a busing team that will go by and like collect the dishes and the flatware towards the end of the night? All questions that you need to ask. I could go on and on. about asking what to look out for while choosing your vendors. But the biggest thing is to get to know, like, and trust them, and then just look out for red flags. You might not know what good things to look out for, but there are definitely red flags. So we're going to take another quick break. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about red flags and what to look out for to avoid major issues. Okay, we are back. Let's talk about these red flags, some big things to just look out for with every vendor to know right off the bat that you can't trust them or that you're not going to like them for your wedding day. And look, again, I'm not telling you to hound these people with questions. I'm not telling you to be nasty or harsh or anything like that. But it's an important day. So I'm just saying, do your research, have conversations, nice conversations, but just have conversations and make sure that you get to know these people. Again, that you like them and that you can trust them. And looking out for red flags is a great way to figure out that you don't like them and that you can't trust them. You might not know what to look for, but you can know what to look out for. So a big first red flag is lack of experience. As much as I like to give new vendors, like a great shot, and I will say sometimes new vendors are willing to put in like double, triple, quadruple the amount of work because this new business that they have is their baby. So a new vendor isn't necessarily a bad thing, but look for experience and make sure that you feel at least comfortable with the amount of experience that they have. Maybe you don't want to be the first wedding that people do, but people learn through experience. So as much as I like to give all the vendors a good shot, and if your budget is tight, this might be more of a risk you're willing to take, but look and see how much experience they have and make sure that you're comfortable with the amount of experience that they have. Another red flag is poor communication. Is this vendor responding to emails? So my sister-in-law right now is engaged, and I'm obviously helping her plan, but it's not like I'm kind of her planner, but she's also doing things herself. Anyway, she's reached out to a few florists. I will say that her wedding is not in my area, so it's not like my connections are super helpful for her. So she's reaching out to a few florists, and they're not answering her, which I find mind-boggling. But I'm off the bat like, maybe we don't go with them if they're taking weeks to even answer you. It's kind of ridiculous. So is the vendor answering your emails, your phone calls? Because let me tell you, when you are a lead for them, when you haven't even booked them yet, and you're a hot lead and they're not answering you, you think they're going to answer you once they have your money? I don't think so. I think they're going to not answer you once they have your money. I mean, I'm sure they'll answer you. Maybe they'll do a good job, but communication is really important. When you're planning your wedding, you want people to answer you. Now, of course, remember, your vendors have a life. I have brides sometimes texting me over the weekend or at 10 o'clock at night. And, maybe it's a little my fault because I give out my phone number. I just feel like we're in 2024. Texting is easy. But I also need to remind myself sometimes when it's like 9 o'clock at night and I'm sitting there texting brides back that I have a life and I'm sitting with my husband and I need to not bring my work into the nighttime. So I will say, remember that your vendors have a life too. See if they have business hours. If they don't have like published business hours, I would just try to respect typical business hours. Also remember that they are usually doing weddings on Fridays and Saturdays. So if it's like a Friday night and they're not answering you, they're probably at a wedding rehearsal. Or if it's a Saturday, they're probably at a wedding. And if it's a Sunday, they're recovering from the wedding. A wedding day is like 12 hours sometimes 14 hours, like on your feet all day. It's like Sunday is the recovery day. So try to respect their boundaries. But, if it's taking them a week to get back to you at all, especially when you're a hot lead, that's a red flag. Another one is when they're not offering like a clear written contract. I've had some vendors be like, yeah, we'll just do it. And I'm like, we'll do what? Like, no, I need a written contract. If they're not asking you to sign a contract, take a deposit, if they don't have a system in place for this, like they haven't done this before, that's a red flag. Make sure that they actually have a contract, read their contract. But as much as I love like old school handshake deals with like, you make a deal with your neighbor and it's a handshake and you trust them, they trust you. Like, I love that. But when it comes to your wedding, nope. Unfortunately, nope. They need a contract. And they need like a payment system. If they're like, oh, just give me cash, that's a little weird. If they're like, oh, just send me a Zelle, that's more acceptable. It's actually pretty common. I prefer like a payment system. I will say that I do offer Zelle to a lot of my clients because the online system charges so much money for credit cards. And if I eat the credit card fee, it's kind of losing a lot of money. Sometimes I do it, but it's a lot of money. If I charge them, I feel bad adding that money to them as well. So if they want to pay with a credit card or something, or don't want to put in their banking information, anyway, I offer Zelle if that's easier for them. But I have like a whole online booking system and contract and a way to take deposits and all of that. And I also can take credit card, So if they're just like, Venmo me, that's not super professional. I see it a lot. So I'm not saying it's the biggest red flag, but it's just not the most professional. The other thing that I would say to avoid is like overly aggressive sales tactics. I don't like it. I mean, I don't like overly aggressive sales tactics ever, but this is your wedding day. They shouldn't be pressuring you to make a decision super quickly or pushing you to do upgrades or services you didn't ask for. Of course, this is their livelihood. They're trying to make money. Look, I'm not wedding planning for free. I'm trying to make money too, but I'm not going to, hound people every single day. Did you decide? Did you decide? Did you decide? Like, we're not buying a t-shirt here. Like, you're not buying something little. Like, you're probably spending a lot of money, and they need to allow you to think about it and make a decision that feels best for you. They should want you to be making decisions that feel best for you for your wedding day. So if they're overly aggressive, I don't like it. Another thing to look for is reviews. Do they have any reviews? Again, this is kind of hard because newer vendors are going to not have as many reviews, and it doesn't mean they're bad, but it's a good way to get to know them, get to trust them. Is what are other people saying? Do they have reviews on Google, on the Knot, on their Instagram? Do other people tag them in photos? And then another red flag, I have a lot of red flags, you guys, is the vendor refusing to accommodate your specific requests, or are they insisting on doing things only their way? Of course, it's a business. They're going to have packages. They have a way that they do things, but are they willing to, every wedding is so different. So are they willing to accommodate your request? Or are they at least, even if the answer ends up being no, like, are they trying? Are they like, okay, we can't do this, but I could do that? And I'm not saying that, like, if you're asking them for 50% discount and they say no, like, okay, that's not a red flag. Like, they just can't necessarily do that. But if they're asking, okay, I have a wedding coming up and it's a smaller wedding, it's not like the typical layout, and they live literally 5 minutes from the venue, literally 5 minutes. And the way that this wedding is, they're not doing a traditional like reception. It's more of a ceremony, and then they're just going to dinner. So I don't really necessarily need to hang out at dinner. I don't need to be at the restaurant once everyone's settled in. And the wedding's only like, I think it's 29 people is the guest count. So it's not a typical wedding. Anyway, they're like, hey, instead of just standing at the dinner, can you take a few of these items to our house? And often I don't do things like that. But in this case, it's 5 minutes away. There's nothing else for me to do. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. I can accommodate that. I can try my best. I can have my assistant go do it, or I can go do it. Like, I want to make their wedding day as easy as possible for them. So that's nothing that's going to cost me money. It's not going to really take time. It's not like they're asking me to do that after hours. They're saying, hey, leave the dinner because there's nothing for you to do there, and just take a few of these items back to our house for us. Okay, sure, no big deal. unprofessionalism that kind of, goes for itself, but are they disorganized? Are they acting unprofessional? Do they use bad language in front of you? You don't want that. And then, I could go on and on forever, but just it all goes back to you have to know, like, and trust them. Do they have bad energy? Are they really negative? Are they talking bad about people? Are they not interested in your vision? That's a big red flag. So I could go on and on, but I hope that this list helps. Another big red flag that definitely matters is, are they licensed and insured? Ask them these questions, ask them for proof of it. Are they a legit company and are they licensed and insured? Make sure it's not a scam. Make sure that, again, I'm all for new vendors, but they have to at least like be an actual company, So make sure that they are licensed and insured. Well, you guys, I hope that this helped. Having a great team of vendors really makes a huge difference. I was talking about this last week when we had DJ Ivanko on the podcast. We were talking about how, vendors all work as a team together on the wedding day. And that's why having a good DJ is great. You need to have a good DJ, but a good DJ who also is a team player, who will help out the other vendors and all willing to work together makes such a big difference. And him and I were talking about how, like, a wedding we did a few weeks ago, I just jumped up and helped pass the microphone for him. And he was like, that meant so much. And I was like, oh, I mean, like, of course. But that was something like I was willing to hop up and like help him move the microphone and blah, blah, blah. And that goes a long way. And on the flip side, like, he was really like, our timeline shifted a little bit. The bride and groom were like, okay, we don't want to cut the cake right now. And can we shift this? Cause some like little game time decisions. And he was willing to, move things around for me as well. And so that just goes a long way. There's always going to be little things that are different than you plan. But if the vendors all work well if they're all doing their own job well, and then they all work as a team well, you guys are golden. You're going to have a great wedding day. If everyone can do their own job really well, and then also be team players, that's amazing. So like I said, get to know these people, make sure you like them and make sure that you trust them. Make sure that other people like them and trust them. Look at reviews, Instagram is a great tool, you guys. If you're not on Instagram, get on Instagram. I'm not saying that you have to live on the app, but when you're picking your vendors, go on there and see pictures that they're posted, pictures that they're tagged in, other vendors. And I wouldn't be afraid to message other vendors and stuff. Be like, hey, I saw that you worked a wedding with this DJ or with this photographer. What'd you think? Did you like them? So I hope this helped. I would love to help you guys find your dream team of wedding vendors. I've worked with such great vendors, and I would love to work with you guys and see who's the best fit for you. I am in South Florida in the Palm Beach area. If you're here, I'd love to work with you. If you're not here, I would still love to work with you. We can even do just like virtual planning where I'm helping you virtually, or if it's in the budget for me to come to you, I would love nothing more than to come. Make sure that you have the right vendor team and make sure that your day is going smooth. So I do free consultations. We can come, we can chat, and figure out what's the best course of action for you. Anyway, follow me on social media. My Instagram is delightful_planning. TikTok is delightful planning. Everything's delightful planning, you guys. My website is delightfulplanning.com. Email Sydney@delightfulplanning.com. Make sure that you like and follow this podcast. Hopefully you are getting some good tips and tricks for your wedding, especially if you don't have a planner. Hopefully my insight is helping you guys, and I'll see you guys next week.